Welcome to Bat Therapy, mental health through the lens of comics and film. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We're your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. You're not going to sing it?
All right, fine. Somebody save me.
Woohoo! Keaton wanted to make me always do the singing, so I made him do it today.
I'm not. It's out of my range.
Whatever. It's all about the fun. You know, it's like karaoke. It's not always about the singing, like the singing voice.
Well, karaoke's all about alcohol.
About the energy.
and it giving you the bravery to sing it. So yeah, and I don't record this podcast drunk, and so yeah, the singing. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being willing to bend the rules for us. So
I'll record one drunk, but that's for our Patreon.
So another Smallville episode.
Yes.
Ambush.
Season 10. Yes, season 10, episode 7. So it's the last season of Smallville. And
so one that you've watched, but I probably did not watch most of the season.
Oh, did you skip over season 10?
I got lost somewhere. You know, once he started working at the Daily Planet and this and that, I was like,
It wasn't. So season 10 was not, in my opinion, it wasn't one of my favorite seasons of Smallville as far as like what happened. But what I did love about season 10 was Lois and Clark. Like they really this was their season. It was so much of their relationship and them becoming the Lois and Clark that we now know. And so that's what I really loved about it. And that's what we get to see in this episode. So we talked about it and we were like, we need to do something for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And Smallville, this episode is a Thanksgiving episode. And it's funny because, you know, I know we talked about like the election before and how rough that is for people. And of course, with it being right before Thanksgiving, I'm sure there's going to be some rough, interesting times coming up. And this episode kind of touches on that because in the episode, there is a vigilante registration act that is
things are getting intense.
It's on the table, right? It's like, look at you. You beat Marvel Civil War to the punch. But at the same time, Watchmen did it first.
True. I mean, this is something that very understandably comes up a lot in a lot of the superhero storylines because essentially this, how do you balance the tensions between the non-powered and the superpowered and of course governments trying to control these things as well. So I mean, it makes sense that it's a recurring theme, but yeah, I think you're right that I wonder, I'm sure someone even before Watchmen has come up with this, but it's definitely one of those recurring themes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great arc to cover. It's just like, it's one of those things where I felt like they didn't have, in season 10 of Smallville, they didn't have enough superheroes in it to be really like against it. Like, you know, by now we should have had the Justice League all the time, and all of them are like, yeah, fight against it. But they would pop up here and there. We didn't see them enough though, not in my opinion, because I loved it when all the Justice League guys got together. But yeah, so that is on the table, and Lois's dad and sister, General Lane and Lucy, just pop up. Hence the episode title, Ambush. You
totally skipped the fact. So, I've not watched this season.
Your favorite part.
So, I know the first half of Smallville. I start this episode, and oh boy, have things gotten frisky in this season. Like, it starts off, it doesn't even lead into it, doesn't warm me up. No, it starts off with Lois and Clark getting hot and bothered and talking
Hmm.
about having sex on the porch swing.
Yeah,
So not even like having sex, but like
yeah.
doing it out in nature. What I was just like, "Whoa, things change by season 10."
What a shift! What a shift! Clark without the flannel. What is happening right now?
What is going on? So
Not my
they interrupt.
Kansas.
Yeah. So her dad and sister show up while they're necking. Although, how old am I saying that they're necking? But anyway, so they
At least
60.
70.
Yeah, yeah. So so they're necking, they're making out. I think they're starting to undress each other, and boop, here you go. Here's the
Yeah.
general and her sister. So yeah, fun times start right away when it comes to this family
Is
gathering,
that a
which I thought was hysterical.
is that a thing? Do people surprise visit on Thanksgiving? Is that a thing? Like,
I can't really answer that because my family doesn't live close enough together to do that sort of surprise.
well, I have a very small family. And so when it comes to Thanksgiving, it's pretty like my extended family, we never get together. Like Thanksgiving is normally me and my mom. And that was it until now. It's like me, my mom, Eileen, our kids, and then some friends of ours. Like it's gotten bigger over the years, but it
Yeah.
still hasn't gotten bigger
I
because
love
of like,
Friendsgivings. Those are the
yeah,
best.
yeah. But like, and we do Friendsgiving as well, which is always a good time because it gives everybody a chance to kind of vent about whatever was stressing them the hell out over Thanksgiving.
So, okay, so they have the whole vigilante sign up bill or
Yeah,
whatever,
the registration.
the
Yeah,
registration bill. And so General Lane, Lois Lane's dad, is all for this registration. He's very anti-vigilante, which of course Lois is very pro-vigilante. And what I really liked about this is it felt like such a superhuman example of just like normal family
yeah.
tensions and issues
It's
that come up.
politics. It's
Yeah,
politics.
it was politics. It was politics coming up, but in a very superhero version, which I really appreciated, and especially these tensions where it, it's this okay, so this dynamic of Lois becoming her own and the confusion of her significant other because she
Yeah,
turns into the kid role when she's around her dad, and so it
yeah,
confuses Clark how she's reacting to things because it's so different than how she tends to be. And then just these trying to find a way to come together and be a family, but also there are certain limits to how much you can compromise your ideals, but then you're different people, and just all these things that are just so relatable
yeah.
to everyday life and families, but with the superhero complication to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's one of those things like I've said it once, I say it so many times. I love how often superhero shows end up still relating so
Yeah.
well to personal situations because looking at this, one thing that also makes it interesting and one thing that actually happens a lot is someone doesn't always know why you're so passionate about something or
Yeah.
why it bothers you so much because it's our secret like that we have secrets and it's like okay that's
Mhm.
my secret to tell. I don't have to tell you why I hate that law. I don't have to tell you why this hurts me so much. It's just messed up and I don't like it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in this situation because also Lois's dad is definitely overbearing, and I'm not gonna lie,
I would agree with that.
Michael Ironside is the perfect casting
Oh,
choice
yeah,
to
he's so
play him.
good.
I love that man in everything that he is in. He's so intense and terrifying, and I'm like, he would be the best angry grandpa ever. Like I love him in everything. And so he's perfect cast for General Lane. Um and so the way he's just intense and overbearing and
Mhm.
immediately that stereotypical whoever my daughter's dating, I don't like them. Like it's
Oh,
really
yeah.
funny because it's also very, very traditional. Like
Uh-huh.
that attitude, like I'm gonna keep a gun on the counter just in case you get frisky with my daughter. Like that whole thing, it's like, dude, it's 2000s. Stop being weird.
Okay. So I have to throw something out there that I may have already thrown out there before. You know what bothers me about Clark Kent?
Go ahead. It's not Batman.
Very much so. He's not not the sharpest tool in the shed, not the brightest crayon in the box. So,
True.
okay.
I like that.
General Lane is like, I don't trust any of her boyfriends. Da da da. Here's a long list of things that I demand you do to show that you care about her. And then he only gets it done because he uses his superpowers. Seriously?
Like right now. Now.
Yeah, he's like, I'm chopping wood, and he's just like throwing it all down on the ground with his
Punching
super
it.
strength. And I'm
Like
thinking to
punching it
myself,
apart.
are you literally trying to make sure he knows you're a vigilante? Like,
Right.
what are you doing?
Right. Like you're really bad at this. Like
And
really
this is
bad.
not the first time that Clark has done stuff like this. I feel like he all the time is just kind of bumbling around, like, oh, no one's gonna notice, right? I'm like, why? You're supposed to be a normal human boyfriend. What are you doing?
Yeah, he already hasn't invented the Clark Kent persona yet. So he just looks exactly like
Oh yeah.
himself at
Yeah,
all
there's that too.
times.
Like, come on,
Like
man.
he
Like,
already, that,
and he's dating Lois, and she's not correcting him on any of this. I mean, she's feeling torn in two, so I guess I'll give her a little credit. But you'd think she'd at least give him a hard time about not disguising himself at all when he's the blur.
it was, I'm not gonna lie, Lois was very different this episode. And and I can
Mm,
kind of understand because people are different
yes,
around family. That is just
absolutely.
something that happens. They can be different around family. One thing that made my jaw kind of hit the floor that I was really shocked by was when General Lane ordered her to
Oh
come
God.
with them and
Uh-huh.
she went and I was like, whose Lois is this? Not my Lois. Like
Well, and
because
that's how Clark was reacting too. And
yeah,
and so they show that she's conflicted and she doesn't want to go with them. And then pretty quickly once she does, she sets some limits, which is great.
yes, that is
But
true.
one of the things I think is helpful with this, because you're right, we adapt and we're different with different people in different situations.
Yes.
But in particular, it can be very hard to change patterns with family. And so, especially, here's the dynamic of clearly they never left the dynamic of he's in charge, he's the general, I'm his daughter,
Hmm.
and so shifting toward adult where there's more of that balanced
Right.
relationship hasn't really happened for them. And one
Right.
of the things that can make this difficult is you can think about schemas. So essentially, schemas are the maps that you've plotted out in your brain, and
Hmm.
and these aren't conscious when they're happening. This is a way to make things easier for you. Your brain tries to fit things into different schemas, different scenarios, so
Okay.
that it knows how to react, respond, what to expect. So, for example, if you go into a classroom as a student, you approach it in a certain way that's different than going to a bar or going to a movie theater,
Right.
right? So you have these different ideas of how to respond and how to act in different scenarios, and you can very much have that with family. And
Right.
so here we have Clark going just like you, and admittedly me too. We're watching, we're like, what is going on with Lois here?
Hell is
But I
this?
think there are a
Yeah.
lot of people that can relate to that, where
Yeah.
sometimes we'll say, I'm so much more reactive with my family, or it's like I'm a kid again, or why can't we get this to change? You can get stuck in just that expectation and what you all are used to, especially with family, if you've been living with it for so long.
Yeah.
And then they had the complications of the mom dying, and so the dynamic in their family was very strongly made around the loss of their mom. And so, and then add a really strong personality like her dad. There you
Right.
go.
And it can be difficult too because especially when that is the way she grew up. Lois grew up an
Yep.
army brat. It was
Yep.
just them.
And you follow instructions. You do what you're told. Just like, by the way, he's used to hierarchy, and so it makes sense that that translates over to
Right.
the family. You can definitely tell there's that hierarchy where, okay,
Yeah.
he's in charge. He's the general.
And it also, like, knowing how you were raised and how you operate, and that's how you lived for so long, it can put you on the defensive when someone is
Mm.
telling you that that might not be right, or
Oh, for
you
sure. Yeah.
shouldn't be that way. Like, you can, it makes your defense go, because and even at one point Lois kind of digs in deep, and it,
Hmm.
like, it was about, because because I think she says something along the lines of, like, she was about to say, you don't even have a father, like,
I know, right?
she
Ooh.
was about to say that, and that was, whew, I was like, damn, like, Lois, don't go
Yeah.
there. We're
Yeah.
still
Low
upset
blow
about
girl.
Jonathan
Low blow
Kent. Like,
girl.
it's been 5 seasons, but we're still hurting over that. So don't,
Don't do that.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
And that's totally so true because here and especially too, so you mentioned army brat. So one of the things about an army family in particular is you tend to be moving around a lot. So the one of the only consistencies is each other. And
right,
then you tend to have a lot of time, not always, but a lot of times, that hierarchical structure with the family might be more common. Uh and then like you said, when something tries to call into question what you know, even if it's trying to encourage a good change, change feels so uncomfortable. And and also it can be tricky cuz I mean, like let's take this scenario. He wasn't doing it because he was trying to manipulate her
right,
or treat her poorly. It's cuz he loves her and he cares
right,
about even how hard he is on the boyfriends. It's because he wants Lois to really find the one for her, and so,
right.
okay, make her fight for the one that matters. If she's not gonna fight for them, they're not the one. So he's doing all these things out of love, and she knows that, and so I think that even adds a little bit more to that reaction. Because 'cause you're right, it starts getting tested. Clark starts testing it, and she is not on board. And she needs time for what he's saying to sink in. Because later, she's able to take it on and she finds this really good balance. But it can be hard to try and realize, oh, hey, how we've been doing things isn't working.
Well, and the thing that's interesting is you're when you spend time away from your family, it's so much easier when it comes to the family you choose,
Mm,
right? Because the family you choose, they accept you for who you are,
hmm.
they love you for who you are, you get along with them because you have so much in common with them.
Yep.
Versus your family that you are born with, it's like, this is just it, right?
Hmm.
Like, it makes me think about siblings who have nothing in common. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, how did this happen? But they're close, but it's because they share blood. Versus if
Well,
you
and they
take,
share a background.
and they share a background, true. And
That
yeah,
past, that history together. But yeah, it's different. That's a different
yeah.
bond.
Versus
Yeah.
when you compare those same siblings with their best
Yep.
friends, and it's
Yep.
like, wow, y'all could be sisters in that sense of how much they have in common, how alike
Mhm.
they are, how quick they bounce stuff off each other. And so it's such a different dynamic with that, because that family you're born with is like, okay, that is tradition, that is just how it is. And unless, and I feel like it takes a lot to break those bonds,
It
right? It's,
absolutely can take a lot,
yeah,
and it can be really unfortunate to see. So, in the scenario we're talking about, there's this rift that could completely break Lois from her family. But fortunately, essentially some extreme scenarios happen and her dad's like, "You know what? Vigilantes aren't entirely bad cuz my daughter's still alive." So, they're able to come on board together. He also I think him and Clark come to an understanding with each other and find a way more to accept each other and their differences and what they have in common. They're able to make their way through that a bit. But also once again, the general he what he wants for his daughter is actually what she's asking for. She's
Mhm.
asking for him to respect her autonomy, see her as an independent person. That's what he wants for her. But it's hard. Those schemas are set in place. So it's hard to translate that, especially if you're the one who literally raised her.
Right.
If you're the parent, it can be hard to make that transition. And so she's fighting for the completion of really what he's been aiming for the whole time. So fortunately they're able to get there. Not all families are. And what you're talking about really is key. You cannot choose the family you're born with. And to a certain extent, so not everyone, even the family they're raised with, might not necessarily be where they were born, but most of the time you didn't have a choice. The adoption, the guardianship, whatever it is, it is what it is for you, and that's
Yeah.
your family. Versus, friendsgiving. Friendsgiving is great.
Yeah.
It's so amazing because, like you said, it's people that you've chosen in your life, and so because of that, it's harder it's harder to build friendships to the point where their bonds are as strong as a family
Mhm.
because you don't have those automatic ties, you don't have that historical tie either.
Right.
But if you're able to build that bond, it's less likely to cause the types of conflict we're seeing in this episode because of the ways you relate to each other and why
Mhm.
you chose each other. And
Right.
it can be really hard when the family you're raised in or born with isn't good for you. And let's say you try and do what Lois does, you try and set things up where you can have a healthy relationship, things can change for the better, and it doesn't happen. And then what do you do? And sometimes people get caught in the cycle of trying to make things better, and it
Yeah.
just keeps circling and circling.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I I have never personally experienced these situations. Like I said, a lot of it's just I'm an only child raised by a single mom. It was very, very small. But like the dynamics too, because I know we touched on a lot between Lois and her dad, but Lois and her sister.
Ah, we haven't even hit on that one. Yeah, that one's weird.
Oh my gosh. Right? Like
So weird.
super weird. Like
There's
and
a
like,
lot more work that needs to be done in that relationship than with Lois and her dad.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
I
so you might have to fill in a little bit of the blanks because, as I mentioned before, I haven't seen as much of the later stuff, but there was already a tension between the two
yeah,
when things first started.
there's already a lot of tension between Lois and Lucy just because even though we've seen Lois be like the one that takes chances and is constantly getting messy, Lucy's unhinged. Like she just like gets into all kinds of things, and Lois is constantly having to get her out. And Lois sees Lucy's patterns way more than anyone because she's
Yeah.
constantly just had to deal with it. And so at
She's
one
the one
point,
bailing her out all the time.
all the time, all the
Mm,
time.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so it's just immediately Lucy just goes up in the barn and just makes a pass at Clark and
Oh
just
god, I forgot. I even forgot
and
about that part.
and
Yeah, she
forces a
barely says
kiss on him.
hello to him.
Yeah,
Barely says hello and is like smacking. Now I'm saying smacking him on the
yeah.
lips. Well, how old am I? I
And I'm
keep
like,
using these old
yeah,
terms for
yeah,
kissing.
you're
It's
good.
weird.
Yeah, full. Yeah, I'm like, you're just reminiscing about the Great Depression tonight. Yeah,
I so I I will say though that Lois's response is hilarious because first she's like, "Lucy, don't even try. I see what
yeah.
you're doing here."
I know
But
what you're
then she's
doing.
like, "Seriously, Clark, you couldn't see that you're Superman. You can't see that coming."
Right. She's like,
Which is fair. How
you've got
how come he
super
didn't
speed
just
and you
stop
couldn't
it?
run. Like, yeah,
You couldn't
like
block that? Come
right,
on. You couldn't
right. Like,
dodge your head a
dude,
little bit?
you could have sneezed her out of this barn. Like, you could have. Like, get the hell out of here. Yeah, and
So
like
I'm
it's
with Lois on that. He is fast enough that he could have seen that coming and moved
like
and
whoop,
only have
like
been
just dodge.
slightly
Yeah,
suspicious.
like
Yeah.
bro, you dodge bullets every episode. Every episode. As soon as she leaned in, you could have whoop, like you could have
Lean
just
out. Yeah.
out of there.
Mhm.
She wouldn't have even known what happened. Like she wouldn't have
Yeah.
even like,
Yeah.
oh wow, look, that door fell off. Like he could have and she makes a point. She's like, and you didn't stop. And that's where
Mhm.
I think the tension really comes from because she's like, I do feel bad for Lois because she is doing her best to hold it together. She's
Yeah.
doing her very best. She's like, I know I'm in between y'all. I know I'm making dinner. Look, I'm making dinner. I'm doing all this stuff that's uncomfortable for me,
Yep.
but I'm doing it for the sake of y'all, and y'all aren't even meeting me
Yep.
halfway. And that's how
Yep.
she feels about it. At the same time, Clark is over here like, I am the Blur. He's trying to pass legislation
Yep.
against me.
Mhm.
And Lois's dad is over there and he's like, he's pro vigilante and he's trying to date my daughter. And so they both feel like they are in completely in the right
Yep.
in this situation. And like the thing is, from our perspective, I mean, honestly, I don't think there are a lot of Smallville watchers that were not Team Clark, right? But in this
I
situation,
don't know.
because
Like I said, he's not my favorite.
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I give you that. I give you that. And so it's she's in the middle and she's like, can't we just all get
Yeah.
along? And both of them are saying, no, absolutely not. And that right there is that stereotypical Thanksgiving tension that we always see in
Mhm.
movies, that we always hear about on Facebook and Instagram. That is the tension, especially on an election year, right?
Oh god,
And
yeah.
it's like
Do they
you're
time that on purpose?
I swear, I swear, it's like, hey, let's have an election that decides the next 4 years, and then we'll
Watch the
get
world
everyone
burn.
together in 3 weeks, right?
There
And
you
and
go.
it's but at the same time, and I'll say this, I because you mentioned setting boundaries
Mhm.
earlier. And that is something that's very, very important. If there is a sensitive subject or a topic that you know is going to bring you pain or ruin your day or even just cause you stress or anxiety, you can tell someone, hey, can we not talk
Yep.
about that? Hey,
Absolutely.
let's not bring it up because it can be difficult, right? It can be very, very difficult, especially when it's something that, I mean, honestly, with the election, terrifies you,
Yeah.
scares you, makes your skin crawl, like makes your hair stand up on your arm. Like these are things that are like actually hurting people and actually bothering people. And so there's nothing wrong. And this just doesn't just go for Thanksgiving or the election. There's nothing wrong with setting boundaries,
Yep.
period. Right?
And I think that's one of the things that is make or break when it comes to, is it a successful family gathering? Is it successful enough?
Yeah.
Or is it detrimental to the relationship? So
Right.
this episode shows how it could have shifted to detrimental.
Yes.
Everyone's on opposing sides and they refuse to even be in the same place and be on opposing sides.
Right.
And there are times where that's true, and that might be the right decision for people where we're not on the same page. We cannot be in a respectful place together. We need distance.
We need
But
distance.
there are a lot of situations where absolutely there can be just limits set. And it doesn't necessarily have to be formal, where here are the things that need to happen and need to not happen in order for us to come together. Sometimes you need it that formal, that straightforward. Some people need it because they're very concrete and they need you to just tell them so that they
Hmm.
know. Sometimes there are people who struggle with maintaining those boundaries and they need something black and white that you can bring back around, remind them of as you go. And sometimes you need to show people that, hey, this is really important. This is a make or break kind of boundary we're talking about here. So sometimes you do need to be more formal, more outright with it. But a
Hmm.
lot of times you can do like what you were saying, where maybe if something comes up, you're like, hey, I'd rather not talk about that. And maybe you could even have a few ideas for some topics in the back of your mind so you can easily change the subject
Yeah.
without an awkward pause or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe if something comes up, you decide that maybe there are multiple rooms or there are ways where you can just take a break, you can step away. But absolutely, deciding what is worth and not worth your time and your energy is really important. And
Yes.
sometimes, a lot of times, even families find a way to maneuver around that. Sometimes not. So
Yeah.
honestly, if Clark the Blur hadn't have saved Lois that day, who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows what that family gathering would have looked like? Because the general, I think, he needed something that stark, that big for him to shift his mentality. And arguably, it shifted very easily because it's a TV show.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's not that easy. And it can be really hard too to know where's where's the where's the really hard line where it's going too far. But yeah, you're totally right. It really helpful to have in mind, how can I set those boundaries, maybe even practice, how can I say this, what are ways to change the subject, whatever it might be. Because on the flip side, it's unfair of us to expect people to respect our boundaries if they don't know what they are.
Right.
And we can assume that they might have the same perspective as us, but obviously that's not true. For example, we're talking about elections. Obviously, there are people who see things from different perspectives, see it in different ways, disagree with each other.
Right.
And so it really helps someone not encroach on us and harm us if they know where those lines in the sand are.
Right. And what's also interesting about this, because something that doesn't get touched on, because a lot of the times between Clark and Lois, they would do the tension break by being like, look, here's Rick Flag singing the Star Spangled Banner, which was really funny to me. But um on the same side of that, you had Oliver and Tess working
Ah,
out their differences, which I also
yeah.
really, really appreciate, because we're like, okay, we're seeing Clark and um, General Lane at
Hmm.
odds with each other, but at the same time, we're also seeing Oliver and Tess, who've been at odds with each other, and it's like, okay, how can we meet halfway
Yeah.
here? How can we figure this out? How can we squash this?
So my favorite Smallville character is Oliver Queen.
Yeah,
I like his complex.
the,
Um,
the closest to Batman.
he's closest to Batman. I
Yeah,
I like him
it's what it
damaged
is.
and
It's okay.
psychologically interesting.
It's okay.
And so he is the closest to Batman. And I I actually really respected his character in that episode because so him and Tess have a lot of really complicated history, but she's helping in the watchtower and Chloe has gone away and Oliver and Chloe are together. So he's being broody, he's being Batman-y, he's being mildly insulting and rude to Tess, and she's just outright another here's an example of someone being straight with their boundaries. She's like, "Hey, I get you don't love me being here, you don't have to, but here are certain things that need to change if we're going to keep doing this."
Yeah,
And so she did a really good job of just being just assertively drawing the lines. And what I really respected about Oliver was he did something really complex, which he stepped back and he was able to figure out and communicate to her that it wasn't just them that he was reacting, responding to. It wasn't just
yeah,
Tess, but it was the fact that Tess was there and Chloe, who he loves, was no longer there.
yeah,
And so this frustration and even animosity he felt toward her that was not her fault. She was just what replaced Chloe.
yeah.
And he's able to see that and let her know that. And I thought that was, yeah. I mean, they're not as big of a plot line in this episode, but you're right.
Yeah.
It is a really nice parallel.
Yeah, and one thing that he also mentioned that I really liked too was that there were other things stressing him out. Because
Yep.
yeah, I was joking before about how like Smallville beat the Marvel Civil War to the punch, but the Marvel Civil War comic had already
Yep.
come out, and they did something very similar with Oliver Queen in Smallville, where he came forward and
Yep.
unmasked himself.
Yep.
And so that was also something
He's also
that
very
was
Iron Man-y.
yeah, very much Iron Man. And in the comic, the Marvel Civil War comic, it was Peter Parker.
Was
He
it?
yeah, he unmasked.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
he
totally
unmasked
forgot
himself.
that.
Yeah, it was a huge thing in the
Now I'm gonna have to reread it.
Marvel Civil War comic, right? But and so Oliver Queen did that in Smallville, and so that was also something that was bringing him stress, and that is something that's really, really important. That
Yeah.
sometimes, whenever you're going through something, you have to let the people around you know it's not you.
Uh-huh.
It's there's so much more going on right now. It's not you because a lot of people sitting around, it's very easy sometimes for people to just lock into that assumption that, oh,
Absolutely.
if they're acting like this, it's because they're mad at me. It's because
Mhm.
they don't like me. It's because of something I did. And a
Or
lot of
just
people,
being like,
yeah,
"Why are you being such a jerk to me? I didn't do it." Right?
right.
Yeah, there can definitely. So here's the thing. The one constant that you have, aside from death and taxes and, whatever, uh, is yourself.
Yeah,
When you go somewhere, you go along with yourself.
right.
Yeah. You're the most constant person in your own life. And you're also inside your own head. You are constantly seeing things from your own perspective, but also seeing things respond to you. And so it's only natural to see things, and when they're happening, relate it to yourself, because that's the most constant thing you have.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's so common to overestimate how much you are a component of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, when you go into a situation, uh, you're not just in that situation, you're reacting to the things that have happened before, you're reacting to things that are coming up in front. You usually have more than one thing going on in your mind. There are all these things that are going on for you, but they're kind of in the background. You're not fully thinking of them, but you don't know all of those things when it comes to the person in front of you.
Yeah.
So you oversimplify what they're doing and assume, "Oh, hey, I must be the major factor here." So you're totally right, where being able to be aware and communicate to people how other things are affecting you can be so helpful. And it can
Hmm.
also, when all these tensions are happening, can help bring the tensions down. I mean, don't lie.
Right.
If it is the person, deal with it.
Yeah.
Figure out your
And
way through it. But if there are other factors going on, it's so helpful. It's amazing how much that can bring tension down when you just
absolutely.
speak those truths and realities out loud.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things like as a teacher, and this it's one of you still set those boundaries. You don't give students all of your business and stuff. But
Mm,
as a teacher, if I know that there's something bothering me that happened earlier, a lot of times I'll tell kids about it. I'm like, ugh, how y'all doing today, guys? I'm really frustrated. I had a flat tire this morning. My car got towed, or I didn't sleep well last night. Like I'll
mhm.
tell them. I'll
Yeah.
tell them because it's one of those things like, hey, I don't ever want them to think Hopkins doesn't like me or
Mm.
Hopkins
Well, and
hates teaching
also,
this class, right? And
here's
also, oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
So, well, first off, absolutely. So you don't want them to be reacting. And I actually have times where clients will check in with me. I do a similar thing if I know that there's something that could factor in, like, I'm just a little off today. But a similar kind of thing. You don't want to pull too much focus to yourself where you're the student or you're the client,
Yeah,
but just enough. But I have times sometimes when people are like, "Are you mad at me?" Because think about it, I'm working with folks, high
right,
anxiety, high depression stuff.
right.
So they're going to be even more inclined to say, "Oh, this has to do with me, and I am negatively impacting the scenario." So I've had times when people are like, "Are you mad at me?" And
Hmm.
I'll be like, and if there's something going, I mean, I never go like, "Yes, I'm mad at you." But if there's something going on, I might be like, "Well, I am a bit frustrated with this, that, or the other happening in session right now, or whatever." But there are plenty of times where I go, "Oh, no, I'm not mad at you. I'm wondering what's," or maybe even like before I answer, I'm like, "Oh, what's making you think that?" And finding out what they're thinking. And I'll let them see
Hmm.
me sit and reflect. And then I answer them. And okay, well, here is,
Right.
I think, what's going on for me. And sometimes there's not really anything. Sometimes maybe I didn't sleep well, or, I had a tense earlier session today and maybe I'm
Mhm.
still a little riled up or um but not only is it helpful for them to correct that experience, but you know what you're also doing? You're mirroring, you're you're encouraging what they can develop and learn to do as well.
Right.
So what you're doing as a teacher for students, what I'm doing for clients is, hey, recognition that I'm not just like going off and able to do these things because my life is perfect. No, okay, things happen. How do we adjust? How do we shift? How do we acknowledge the fact that we're human
Yeah.
so that they can take it and run with it? Because, I mean, the skill that Tess and Oliver are using, it's hard to do, especially when
Mhm.
you're dealing with a person and you're both frustrated with each other.
Right.
So it helps if, your teacher shows you a little bit of like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, here's how I can handle these things that
Yeah.
pop up in my life.
Yeah, and I mean, I normally because the school that I'm at, we our classes are only 6 weeks long. Like, and
Mm,
so from the jump, I'm letting students know me. Like from day one, I
mm-hmm.
always let them know. I'm like, listen, just tell me if you're having a bad day.
Yeah.
If as soon as you come in, because I'm at a virtual school, I said, as soon as you log on to Zoom, just send me a message. Hopkins, I'm having a bad day today. I'm not myself, or I'm sick or something. Said because everyone has bad days. I have
Oh, yeah.
bad days. You have bad days. We
Mm-hmm.
all have bad days. And I let them know, I'm like, listen, you have a bad day every now and then and just let me know. That's fine. Keep the camera off. Just try and chime in when you can.
Mm-hmm.
Said, but every day can't be a bad day. We
That's
gotta,
telling us,
yeah,
uh-oh, warning.
right.
Yep.
Every day can't be a bad day. And we gotta learn to kind of just be able to move past things because that's just life, right?
Yep.
That's just life. If you have a flat tire, you still got to get to work.
Yep.
Once you get to work, you still got to do your job.
Yep.
And once you do your job, you still got to go home and cook dinner or
Yep.
put the kids to bed or
And once
make
your
sure
next
that,
day started, you've
yeah,
still got to deal with the fact that your
you
internet
get
cut
back
out on
up.
you. Keaton's
Yeah,
had a week,
yeah.
y'all.
I have had a week. I have had a week. You're right. I had Monday, my check engine light came on, and I went back and forth to 3 different dealerships via shuttle. And in between, I was teaching classes all along. And then this morning at my virtual job, my internet did not work. And they kept telling me it was working when I was literally seeing it not work. And so
Yay.
it's been, it's been a stressful 2 days, but
He's still
still
here.
here Tuesday
He's
night,
recording the episode
bat
and
therapy.
everything.
We're doing
Look
like
at that. Yeah,
but yeah, and that's
it's so
life.
important though, and I know we've kind of shifted off the episode, but here's how you can get like Tess and Oliver, right?
Yeah.
But it is so hard to get to that point where you can say, okay, I'm having all this bad stuff happen. How do I keep going?
Right.
And one of the really pesky things that can happen too is because you were talking about, hey, people on the outside, they don't know everything going on, and so they might take it personally. But you know what
Hmm.
also happens is that people who are less self-confident, who are dealing with things with anxiety, depression, etc.,
Hmm.
a lot of times they're also tricked into thinking that they're not as capable as other people.
Right.
And they're seeing the glossy version. Kind of like on
Hmm.
social media, you only see the good stuff, right? You don't
See
see
the
the
wins,
struggles
never the
people are having.
losses.
You don't see the bad days. And so it's also helpful for people to see like, okay, we're all in this together. We all have our struggles. We're all doing the best we can. We all have times where we don't know the answer. Um, we're all constantly trying to figure it out and then refigure it out again as life changes and morphs on us. And so one of the things that we know is it's harmful to just keep a pretty perfect picture on the outside. It actually creates more stress and anxiety if you're trying to teach someone that everything will be hunky dory and okay. It,
Hmm.
it doesn't actually teach that resilience, and it doesn't teach happiness. Happiness is that resilience and being able to build out of all the negative stuff. So,
Right.
yeah, it's really important stuff that Tess and Oliver are doing, and it's these little blips that you see throughout the episode, but, yeah, it's I really, really like the exchanges that they have in this episode and, like, the other episodes in this kinda section of the season.
Well, because it's one of those things where it's still a relationship that you can't just quit and get out of. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the game that we're in. We're in the life saving
Mhm.
business. I have to do this job. You
Mhm.
have to be there. It's same thing with like a coworker that you're constantly disagreeing with, and you have to figure out how to get the job done. And
Yep.
then with the Lois and Clark situation, it's like, okay, Clark, if you're gonna be with me, these are gonna be your in-laws.
And
Love
also,
them or hate
Clark
them.
saying, "Lois, if you're gonna be with me,
Right,
there's certain things that aren't gonna be okay
right.
to happen with the in-laws."
Yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're gonna have to figure it out if we're
Yep.
gonna be able to be one big happy family. And you
Or
might
just
not,
one big family.
right. I was about to say, and you might not ever be a big happy family because I
Yeah.
know I've said this before, but pain is pain. And
Mm,
if you're hurt over something, no one can tell you that you can't be or that you
right.
shouldn't be.
Yep.
And that's where those boundaries come in, and they're so
Yep.
important. Like, all right, look, we're not talking politics. All right, look, we're not talking about rights. All right, look, we are not discussing my major that I chose in college. All right. I know you're disappointed in it. I don't care. Like, whatever it is, you can set those boundaries and stay in your comfort zone and just eat your turkey in peace.
Mhm. Here, here.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JBS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.